The great hall of Zarian Prime buzzed with the voices of 1,000 different species. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho stood alone at the center, his human form small compared to the towering aliens around him. The air smelled of strange chemicals and ozone from the translation devices that let everyone understand each other. Chancellor Zeftar raised his 4 arms for silence. The Vorthak leader's skin gleamed purple under the bright lights. His voice boomed across the hall when he spoke. "We gather today to decide the fate of humanity in our galaxy," Zeftar announced. "These creatures have shown themselves to be violent and unpredictable. They fight wars among themselves. They create weapons instead of art. They question our wisdom instead of accepting it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kang Dae-ho kept his face calm, but inside he felt sad and angry. Humans had worked for 50 years to earn their place here. They had shared their technology, helped solve disputes, and saved lives during the Great Plague of 2387. Now all of that seemed forgotten. Dr. Park Mi-young sat in the human section, recording everything on her small device. She was one of the smartest scientists in human space, but today she felt helpless. Captain Lee Jun-ho sat beside her, his military uniform pressed and perfect. His jaw was tight with controlled anger. "The evidence is clear," continued Velnara, the Aquarian diplomat. Her blue skin rippled with patterns that showed her emotions. "Humans cannot be trusted with advanced technology. They use it to hurt each other and threaten others. We must act before they become too dangerous." Kang Dae-ho finally spoke. "May I respond to these charges?" "You may speak," Zeftar said, though his tone suggested he did not want to hear it. Kang Dae-ho walked to the center platform. His voice carried clearly through the hall. "You say we are violent, but who stopped the war between the Krell and the Syndicate? Humans did. You say we cannot be trusted, but who shared their medical knowledge? To save millions during the plague? Humans did. You say we question your wisdom, but is asking questions not how we learn and grow?" Some aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few nodded slightly, but most remained unmoved. "When we first reached the stars," Kang Dae-ho continued, "we came with open hands and open hearts. We wanted to learn from you, to work with you, to build something beautiful together. Yes, humans have conflicts. Yes, we make mistakes. But we also have something that seems to frighten you. We never stop trying to improve." "Pretty words," Zeftar said with a sneer. "But actions speak louder. Your species fights constantly. Your planet had 3 major wars in the last century, alone. And we learned from each one," Kang Dae-ho replied. "We grew. We became better. When was the last time the Vorthak changed anything about their society? When did the Aquarians last question their own traditions?" The hall erupted in angry voices. Some aliens stood and shook their appendages at Kang Dae-ho. Others activated their translation devices to shout insults in their native languages. Zeftar slammed his staff on the floor. "Enough! This proves our point exactly. Humans are disruptive and dangerous. They cannot accept their place in the natural order." Dr. Park Mi-young watched the faces around her. These beings had once seemed wise and advanced. Now they looked scared and small. They feared change more than anything else, and humans represented change. "The vote will now commence," announced the Chamber's AI system. "All members of the Galactic Federation will decide, should humanity be expelled from Federation space and stripped of all membership privileges?" The voting took 3 hours. Representatives from 847 star systems cast their votes. Red lights appeared on the great board for each vote to expel humanity. Green lights would have meant they could stay. Kang Dae-ho watched as red light after red light filled the display. When it ended, only 23 systems had voted green. The Lyrani, who loved human art. The Zenth Kori, who enjoyed human philosophy. A few others who had worked closely with humans and knew them well. But they were not enough. The vote is final, Zeftar declared. Humanity is expelled from the Galactic Federation. You have 30 standard days to leave all Federation space. Any human vessels found in our territory after that time will be destroyed. The hall filled with cheers and applause. Aliens celebrated like they had won a great victory. Kang Dae-ho stood quietly in the center of it all, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. When the noise finally died down, he spoke one last time. We came to the stars seeking friendship. Since you offer only chains, we choose the void. He paused and looked around the hall. But remember this day. Remember that you had the chance to build something amazing with us, and you chose fear instead. Dr. Park Mi-young gathered her records. Captain Lee Jun-ho stood and straightened his uniform. Together, the three humans walked out of the Great Hall for the last time. No one stopped them. No one said goodbye. Back on their ship, the mood was quiet and sad. Other human vessels were already receiving the news. Messages flooded in from human colonies, research stations, and diplomatic posts throughout Federation space. What do we do now? Dr. Park Mi-young asked. We go home, Kang Dae-ho said simply. We gather our people, our knowledge, and our dreams. Then we find a new place among the stars. They'll regret this, Captain Lee Jun-ho said, his voice hard with anger. Maybe, Kang Dae-ho replied. But that's not our concern anymore. Our concern is building something better than what we're leaving behind. Within days, human ships began departing from every corner of Federation space. They took their families, their belongings, and their knowledge. They said goodbye to alien friends, who were sorry to see them go. They closed down research projects and trade agreements. Some humans cried as they left. Others were angry. But most felt something else, relief. They were finally free to be themselves without constantly proving they deserved to exist. As the Bob, last human ship, crossed the border into the unknown, Captain Cho Sung-min sent a message back to Federation space. It was simple and clear. Thank you for showing us who our real friends are. We'll remember the kindness of those who stood with us. As for the rest, goodbye. The great exodus had begun. Humanity was walking away from the galaxy that had rejected them. None of them knew yet what they would build in the darkness between the stars. But they knew it would be theirs, and it would be beautiful. 3 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the void. The Galactic Federation celebrated their decision every year with a holiday called Purification Day. Speeches were made about how much safer and more orderly the galaxy had become without the chaotic humans. But trade coordinator Erix Tal of the Hegemony was starting to notice strange things in his reports. The 8-armed being sat in his office on the trade world of Commerce Prime, staring at numbers that didn't make sense. This can't be right, he muttered, checking the data again. Supply routes that had run smoothly for decades were breaking down. Shipments arrived late or not at all. Several trading partnerships had simply fallen apart. His assistant, a young hegemony named Brix Tell, floated into the office. Sir, we have another problem. The Kashari agricultural reports are in and they're terrible. Rixtal took the tablet and read quickly. His heart sank with each line. 40% crop failure? How is that possible? Kashari feeds half the inner systems. The automated farming systems are breaking down, Brixtel explained. They were designed by humans decades ago. Without human technicians to maintain them, they're failing one by one. On Kashari itself, Governor Techmore stood in the middle of a vast wheat field that should have been golden and ready for harvest. Instead, the plants were brown and dying. The massive harvesting machines sat silent and broken. Can't we fix them ourselves? He asked his chief engineer. The engineer, a beetle like Keth Mori, clicked his mandibles sadly. We've tried, Governor. The human who designed these systems was named Kim Hee-jin. She created them to work in ways that made sense to humans, but not to us. Every time we think we understand one part, 3 other parts stop working. Governor Thekmore had met Kim Hyejin years ago. She was a small, cheerful woman who could fix anything and make it work better than before. She had spent months on Kashari, teaching local engineers and leaving detailed manuals. But the manuals were written in the human way of thinking, and, without humans to explain them, they might as well have been ancient poetry. "What do the other agricultural worlds report?" the governor asked. "The same story everywhere, sir. Crop yields are dropping. Food shortages are starting in the outer systems. The humans didn't just maintain the machines, they improved them. Constantly. Without that, everything is slowly falling apart." Far from Federation space, in a region marked unexplored on all their maps, humanity was building something new. New Sol Station hung in space like a metal flower, its arms reaching out toward a yellow star. The station grew larger every month as more human ships arrived with materials and people. Admiral Cho Sung-min stood on the observation deck, watching construction crews add another habitat ring to the station. Engineer Lim So-ra worked beside him, pointing out improvements to the design. "The new fusion reactors are 40% more efficient than anything we built in Federation space," she said proudly. "Without their safety regulations holding us back, we can really innovate." "How many people are living here now?" Admiral Cho asked. "Almost 2 million, with more arriving every week. We've found 12 habitable planets in nearby systems. Colony. Ships are already heading out to 3 of them." Admiral Cho smiled. For the first time in years, humans were free to build according to their own vision. No committees of aliens telling them their ideas were too risky. No regulations that made no sense for human technology. Just human creativity unleashed among the stars. But back in Federation space, that same creativity was desperately missed. Dr. Queltan of the Federation Medical Corps stood in his laboratory on the Medical Research Station, staring at samples of the Kethmori plague that had appeared on 7 outer rim worlds. The disease was spreading fast, and nothing they tried could stop it. "Have we contacted the Healing Guild?" he asked his assistant. "Yes, sir. They've sent their best doctors, but the plague is unlike anything they've seen. It changes too quickly for their treatments to work." Dr. Queltan remembered when a similar plague had appeared 5 years ago. Human doctor Nam Hyan Woo had arrived with his medical team and stopped it in just 3 weeks. The humans had a way of thinking about diseases that was completely different from everyone else. Where other species tried to follow established treatments, humans experimented and adapted constantly. "Sir," his assistant said quietly, "I found some old files from Dr. Nam's research. Maybe we could try his methods?" Dr. Queltan looked at the files, but they were full of human medical theories that made no sense to him. Humans seemed to treat diseases like puzzles to be solved rather than problems to be managed. Without human doctors to explain their thinking, the files were useless. "Send word to all medical stations," he said finally. "Tell them to prepare for a long fight. Without human help, this plague is going to spread." The problems weren't limited to medicine and agriculture. On the industrial world of Mechanos 7th, factory supervisor Blixwan watched another production line shut down. These factories had been running perfectly for decades, but now something went wrong every day. "What is it this time?" Blixwan asked wearily. "The main assembly unit is making strange noises," reported the maintenance chief. "We think it's going to break down soon." "Can we fix it?" The maintenance chief was quiet for a moment. "Sir, these machines were designed and installed by human engineers. They left repair manuals, but the manuals assume you think like a human. They talk about creative solutions and improvised fixes that make no sense to us." Blixwan remembered the humans who had worked in these factories. They were always tinkering with things, making small improvements that added up to big gains. Where other species followed procedures exactly, humans seemed to understand machines in a way that let them fix problems no one else could solve. Without them, the factories were slowly dying. In the Federation's research center on Axiom Station, former Federation scientist Vorthek was making a disturbing discovery. He had been studying innovation rates across the galaxy, and the numbers were frightening. Before humanity's expulsion, new technologies appeared every month. Breakthrough discoveries happened regularly. Scientific progress moved at an incredible pace. But in the 3 years since humans left, innovation had slowed to barely a crawl. "The pattern is clear," he reported to his supervisor. "When humans were part of our research teams, they pushed everyone to think differently. They asked questions that no one else thought to ask. They combined ideas in ways that seemed crazy but actually worked. And now?" his supervisor asked. "Now we're just refining old technologies. Real breakthroughs happen maybe once a year instead of once a month. We're becoming stagnant." Vorthek's report was filed away and forgotten. No one wanted to hear that expelling humanity had been a mistake, but in the depths of space, humanity continued to thrive. Captain Yang Min-ho's exploration fleet had just discovered their 15th habitable world. Dr. Bai Jiwan had perfected faster-than-light communication technology that could send messages instantly across vast distances. The Federation had sensors watching the edges of their space hoping to spot human ships, but all they found were empty systems and sometimes floating beacons with simple messages. You made your choice. The humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Chancellor Zeftar received reports about the growing problems, but dismissed them all. "These are temporary setbacks," he declared. "The galaxy is adjusting to a more stable and peaceful future without human chaos." But deep down, even he was starting to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. The first attack came without warning. 3 Federation border worlds went silent in the same day. When rescue ships arrived, they found burning cities and empty space stations. The Vrex Empire, silent for decades, had returned with a vengeance. Supreme. Commander Kaltesh stood in the Federation's war room, staring at the tactical display with growing horror. Red markers showed Vrex fleets advancing deep into Federation space. His own forces were retreating on every front. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our fleets are larger than theirs. Our weapons are more advanced." "Sir," his tactical officer replied nervously, "the Vrex are using strategies we've never seen before. They attack in patterns that make no logical sense, but somehow they work perfectly." Kaltesh remembered human military advisors who had served with Federation forces years ago. Officers like Colonel Park Du-young and General Shin Ye-won had always talked about thinking outside the box and adapting to chaos. At the time, he had dismissed their ideas as primitive and unscientific. Now, watching his carefully planned defenses crumble, he began to understand what he had lost. "Get me all the old human military files," he ordered. "Everything we have about their tactics and strategies." His aide brought boxes of data crystals containing human military doctrine. Kaltesh spent hours reading reports about human battles, trying to understand how they had won impossible victories. But the more he read, the more confused he became. Humans seemed to thrive on disorder. Where other species made careful plans and followed them exactly, humans would change their entire strategy in the middle of a battle if they saw a better opportunity. They treated war like a creative art instead of a precise science. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a message from the Vrex fleet." The hologram of a Vrex commander appeared, its insect-like features twisted in what might have been a smile. "Federation forces, you fight like machines following a program. Predictable, boring. We learned much from watching your human allies years ago. Pity you expelled them before learning those same lessons." The message cut off, leaving Kaltesh staring at empty space. The Vrex had studied human tactics and adapted them to their own use. Meanwhile, the Federation had thrown away their best teachers. On Meccano 7th, the industrial crisis was reaching critical levels. Factory supervisor Blixwan watched another assembly line shut down permanently. They had tried everything to keep the machines running, but without human maintenance, the complex systems were failing one by one. "How much production have we lost?" he asked his assistant. 60%, sir, and it's getting worse every day." Blixwan remembered engineer Kim Da-yoon, who had designed many of these systems. She had a gift for creating machines that seemed almost alive, adapting to problems and fixing themselves. But when she left with the human exodus, she had taken that knowledge with her. What about the other industrial worlds? The same story. Everywhere. Production is collapsing. We can't manufacture weapons for the war effort. We can't build new ships. We're running on whatever we had in storage when the humans left. The Federation's military was discovering that humans had been involved in almost every aspect of their technology. Human engineers had designed their ship computers, human scientists had developed their energy weapons, human doctors had created their medical systems. Without human expertise to maintain and improve these technologies, everything was slowly breaking down. In the Federation's Intelligence Center, Chief Analyst Morgex was putting together a disturbing picture. She had been tracking the cascade failures across Federation space, and a pattern was emerging. "It's not just the obvious things," she reported to her supervisor. "Yes, we're losing the factories and farms that humans built, but there's something deeper. Humans were involved in solving problems that other species couldn't handle. They were our troubleshooters, our innovators, our bridge builders." "What do you mean?" "Look at these records. Every major breakthrough in the last 50 years had human involvement, not as leaders, but as team members who asked the right questions and saw connections that others missed. Without them, our entire civilization is becoming stagnant." Her supervisor, a proud Vorthak, bristled at the suggestion. "We managed fine before humans reached the stars." "Did we?" Morgex pulled up historical data. "Before humans joined the Federation, how often did we develop new technologies? How often did we solve complex problems? The answer is almost never. We maintained what we had, but we rarely created anything truly new." Meanwhile, deep in unexplored space, humanity was thriving like never before. The network of human colonies and stations had grown into a small empire of innovation and discovery. Admiral Kim Da-yoon stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Pioneer, watching as her fleet approached another star system that promised new worlds and new possibilities. Her science officer, Dr. Lee Jae-won, was practically bouncing with excitement. "Admiral, these readings are incredible. 3 habitable planets, asteroid belts rich in rare metals, and energy signatures that suggest advanced crystalline formations. This system could support 10 million colonists easily." Captain Yang Min-ho, leading the survey team, sent his report back to New Seoul Station. "This makes 17 habitable systems we've found in the last 2 years. At this rate, we'll have our own galaxy to explore." Back at New Seoul Station, President Im Dong-hyuk was reviewing proposals for new research projects. Without Federation restrictions, human scientists were developing technologies that would have been impossible before. Dr. Bae Ji-won had perfected her instant communication system, allowing human colonies to stay in contact across vast distances. Engineer Lim So-ra was working on ships that could travel between stars in days instead of months. Medical researcher Dr. Choi Woo-jin was developing treatments for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. "We're advancing faster than we ever did in Federation space," President Im told his cabinet. "It turns out that freedom is the best fuel for human creativity." But the Federation was only beginning to understand what they had lost. On the agricultural world of Kashari, Governor Thekmore was facing a complete system collapse. The automated farms that fed billions of people were failing beyond repair. "Sir," his aide reported, "we've tried contacting every engineering firm in Federation space. None of them can fix the human-designed systems. Some have offered to replace them with new technology, but that would take decades and cost more than our entire planetary budget. Governor Thekmore made a decision that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. Send a message on all frequencies. Tell them Governor Thekmore of Keshari is requesting assistance from human engineer Kim Hye-jin. We're willing to pay any price for her help. The message was sent into the void, but no answer came back. The humans had vanished so completely that no one knew how to find them. Similar messages began appearing from across Federation space. Requests for human doctors to fight the spreading plagues. Pleas for human engineers to fix failing infrastructure. Desperate calls for human mediators to solve conflicts that were spiraling out of control. None received answers. In his private office, Chancellor Zeftar finally read the full reports about the cascading failures across his territory. The numbers were undeniable. Food production down 60%. Industrial output failing rapidly. Military defeats mounting. Scientific progress nearly stopped. His aide, who had served him for decades, spoke quietly. "Sir, perhaps it's time to consider that we made an error in judgment." Zeftar's purple skin darkened with anger, but for the first time it was directed at himself rather than others. "They tried to warn us. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho said we would regret this decision. I thought he was making empty threats. What do we do now, sir?" Zeftar stared out the window at the great city below. Construction projects stood half-finished because the building systems were too complex to operate without human expertise. Transport networks were failing because human traffic controllers had managed the impossible complexity of moving millions of beings safely each day. "Find them," he said finally. "Use every resource we have. Find the humans and bring them back." But in the vast darkness between the stars, humanity was no longer the desperate species that had been cast out 3 years ago. They had become something new, something stronger, and they had no intention of returning to those who had rejected them. The search began with 1,000 ships spreading across the galaxy's edge, following faint trails that might lead to humanity. Chancellor Zeftar had authorized the largest intelligence operation in Federation history, led by Intelligence Chief Morgex, the same analyst who had first recognized the pattern of failures. Every hyperspace signature, every gravitational anomaly, every piece of space debris, Morgex ordered her teams. Humans didn't just vanish, they went somewhere, and they left traces. The first breakthrough came 6 months into the search. A patrol found an abandoned human research station in the outer spiral. The team that investigated it found empty corridors and stripped laboratories. Every piece of useful technology had been removed with surgical precision. They knew we would. "Come looking," reported Captain Vexhole, leading the investigation team. "This place was abandoned recently, but they took everything valuable. Even the computer cores are gone." Morgex studied the report with growing frustration. "It's like they prepared for this. How long were they planning their departure? Her question was answered when they found similar abandoned sites across the galaxy's rim. Human colonies, research outposts, and trading stations, all empty, all stripped clean. The humans had been preparing for exile long before the vote that expelled them. While the Federation searched desperately, their civilization continued to crumble. The Vrex Empire had conquered 12 more systems using tactics learned from studying human military doctrine. The Kethmori plague was spreading unchecked through the outer rim, killing millions. Industrial production had fallen to levels not seen in centuries. On the trade world of Commerce Prime, trade coordinator Erixtal was facing the complete breakdown of galactic commerce. Supply chains that had operated smoothly for decades were falling apart without human coordination. "Sir," his assistant Brixtel reported, "we've lost contact with the Syndicate trading fleet. They were carrying medical supplies to the plague zones." "What happened?" "Their navigation systems failed in the Nebula sector. The route they were using was mapped by human surveyors decades ago. Without human pilots who understood those tricky navigation patterns, they got lost in the stellar maze. Erixtal felt a familiar helplessness. Humans had mapped most of the galaxy's dangerous regions because they seemed to enjoy challenges that other species avoided. They had found safe routes through nebulae, asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies that no one else could navigate. How many other trade routes depend on human navigation data? Brixatel checked his files. Nearly 40%, sir. All the routes through dangerous space. Other species always hired human pilots for those regions. The Federation was discovering that humans had been the glue holding their civilization together in ways they never realized. They didn't just build machines and fight wars. They solved problems that no one else wanted to tackle. The first real contact came when a Federation patrol caught a lone human merchant ship near the border. The vessel was captained by No Jae Sung, who had been trading medical supplies to the Lirani people who had voted against human expulsion. Captain Vexhole of the Federation patrol ordered the human ship to surrender. By order of the Galactic Federation, you are under arrest for illegal presence in Federation space. Captain No responded calmly over the communication channel. I'm not in Federation space, Captain. Check your star charts. This system was never claimed by any Federation member. Vexhole checked and found that No was correct. The human trader was operating in unclaimed space, technically beyond Federation authority. But Vexhole had his orders. You will come with us for questioning about human activities. I don't think so, No replied. But I'll give you a message to take back to your leaders. Tell them that Captain No Jae Sung says hello, and that we're doing just fine without you. The human ship activated a drive system that Vexahole had never seen before. It didn't use hyperspace like Federation ships. Instead, it seemed to fold space around itself and vanish instantly. The Federation patrol was left staring at empty space, wondering how humans had developed technology so far beyond their own. Back at Federation headquarters, Morgex interrogated the patrol captain about what he had seen. You're certain about this new drive system? Yes, ma'am. It was completely unlike anything in our databases. They didn't enter hyperspace, they just disappeared. And the human captain seemed confident? More than confident. He acted like we were beneath his notice, like the Federation was irrelevant to him. Morgex felt a chill. The humans they were searching for were not the same species that had been expelled 3 years ago. They had grown stronger, more advanced, and apparently less interested in Federation affairs. Her fears were confirmed when intelligence reports began coming in from the galaxy's edge. The Lirani, who had voted against human expulsion, were thriving. Their art colonies were producing masterpieces, their science stations were making breakthrough discoveries, and their people seemed happier than they had in decades. How is this possible? Chancellor Zeftar demanded when he read the reports. The Lirani were always a minor species. They contributed nothing significant to Federation science or culture. Sir, Morgex replied carefully, it appears they're working with humans now. Our intelligence suggests that humans have been sharing advanced technologies with the species that showed them friendship. The Zenth Kori, the philosophical race, that had also voted to keep humans, were displaying similar improvements. Their meditation centers were developing new forms of consciousness expansion. Their peaceful cities had become models of efficient urban planning. Even more disturbing were reports about the Krival, the warrior poets that the Federation had always dismissed as primitive barbarians. They had somehow acquired advanced weapons and ships, and were now protecting trade routes that the Federation could no longer patrol. The humans are building their own alliance, Morgex concluded. They're working with the species that treated them well, while avoiding contact with the rest of us. Chancellor Zeftar reviewed the list of species that had voted for human expulsion. They were all facing problems. The list of species that had voted against expulsion were all thriving. The pattern was obvious and humiliating. The Federations. Worst disaster struck without warning. The orbital shipyards above Xerion Prime, the same world where humans had been expelled, suffered a catastrophic system failure. Half the Federation's military fleet was destroyed in a chain reaction that started with a single computer error. Chief Engineer Yulvex stood in the wreckage, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The primary control system was designed by human engineer Dr. Song Yu-jin 20 years ago. She installed multiple redundant safety protocols, but they all require human oversight to function properly. "Can't we just follow her original specifications?" demanded Admiral Kaltesh, surveying. "The destruction, sir. The specifications assume human thinking patterns. They include decision trees that make sense to humans but not to other species. Without Dr. Song or another human engineer to interpret them, the safety systems became unstable." The loss of the shipyards was devastating, but the larger message was worse. The Federation's most critical infrastructure had been designed by humans for humans. Without human maintenance, it was all slowly failing. In the depths of space, Admiral Kim Da-un watched Federation probe ships on her long-range sensors from the bridge of New Seoul Station. The human fleet had grown to over 1,000 vessels, and human colonies were spreading across dozens of star systems. "They're still looking for us," reported Communications Officer Oh Min-jae. "Let them look," Admiral Kim replied. "We're not hiding from them. We're just not interested in being found." Captain Park Do-young, who had once served as a military advisor to Federation forces, joined them at the sensor station. "They're using search patterns I taught them 3 years ago. They haven't learned anything new since we left. Should we contact them?" Oh Min-jae asked. Admiral Kim considered the question. Around her, New Seoul Station hummed with activity. Human families lived in comfortable homes. Human scientists made discoveries that would change the galaxy. Human artists created beauty that took her breath away. "No," she said finally. "They made their choice when they expelled us. Now they can live with the consequences." President Im Dong-hyuk was making the same decision in his council chambers. Reports had reached human space about the Federation's search efforts and their growing problems. Some human leaders argued for mercy. Others wanted revenge. "They don't want us back because they value us," said General Shin Ye-won, who had once served alongside Federation forces. "They want us back because they need us. That's not the same thing." Dr. Bae Ji-won, whose instant communication system now connected all human colonies, agreed. "We offered partnership. They demanded submission. Now they want to dictate the terms of our return." President Im looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. These were people who had built something beautiful in the darkness between stars. They had proven that humanity could thrive without the Federation's approval. "The vote is unanimous then," he said. "We continue building our own future. The Federation chose to walk away from us. Now we choose to walk away from them." But the Federation's search continued, growing more desperate each day. The Galactic Federation was dying, and everyone knew it. What had once been a proud alliance of over 800 species was breaking apart as member worlds declared independence or simply stopped responding to central authority. Wars raged in dozens of sectors while plague and famine spread unchecked. Chancellor Zeftar stood in his office, looking out at a city that was slowly falling apart. Construction robots sat motionless because no one understood their human-designed programming. Transport systems failed daily because human traffic controllers were no longer there to manage the impossible complexity. Even the air recycling plants were breaking down because they relied on human maintenance protocols. "Sir," his aide announced nervously, "Ambassador Quinsara of the Hegemony is here with an urgent request." Ambassador Quinsara entered, her usually pristine appearance showing signs of stress. The elegant diplomat who had once spoken proudly of Federation superiority now looked desperate. "Chancellor," she began, without the usual formal greetings, "my government needs immediate assistance. The Keth Mori plague has reached our core worlds." Our medical corps estimates 50 million dead within 6 months if we can't find a cure. What do you want me to do? Zephytar asked wearily. Our own medical facilities are overwhelmed. We need to contact the humans, Quinsara said bluntly. We know they've been trading with some of the species that voted against their expulsion. The Lyrani, the Xanthocori, others. If we could reach them through those intermediaries, the humans will never help us, Zephytar replied. We expelled them. We called them dangerous and chaotic. Why would they lift a finger to save us? Because, Quinsara said quietly, helping people is what humans do, even when those people have wronged them. Her words stung because Zephytar remembered that she was right. Humans had always been the first to offer aid during disasters, the first to volunteer for dangerous rescue missions, the first to share their resources with those in need. It was one of the things that had made other species uncomfortable about them. I'll authorize the contact attempt, Zephytar said finally. But don't expect miracles. The message was sent through Lyrani space, addressed to any human authorities who might receive it. Ambassador Quinsara swallowed her pride and recorded. A personal plea to the human leadership. This is Ambassador Quinsara of the Hegemony. We are facing a medical crisis that threatens the lives of billions. We formally request humanitarian assistance and are prepared to offer compensation for any aid provided. The response came 3 days later, not from human space, but from a Lyrani medical station. Dr. Silthara, a Lyrani physician who had worked with humans, delivered the message with cold precision. Ambassador Quinsara, your request has been forwarded to human medical authorities. Dr. Choi Woo-jin sends his response. Human medical teams will provide assistance to any world suffering from the Kethmori plague, regardless of political affiliation. Medical relief ships will arrive within 1 week. However, this assistance is offered on humanitarian grounds only and does not indicate any desire for political reconciliation. Quinsara felt a mixture of relief and shame. Even after everything the Federation had done, humans were still willing to save lives. But their message was clear. They were helping because it was right, not because they forgave the Federation's actions. The human medical ships that arrived were unlike anything the Federation had seen before. They were sleek, efficient, and equipped with technology decades ahead of Federation medicine. Dr. Choi Woo-jin led a team of specialists who had been developing plague treatments in human space. The Kethmori plague is actually 3 different diseases working together, he explained to Federation medical officers. Your doctors have been treating the symptoms instead of the cause. We developed this treatment matrix 2 years ago when we encountered a similar outbreak in the outer spiral. Within weeks, the plague was contained and cured. Billions of lives were saved. But when Federation officials tried to thank the human medical teams personally, they found the humans had already departed, leaving only detailed treatment protocols and enough medicine to handle future outbreaks. Word of human assistance spread quickly, and more requests began arriving. Desperate governors begged for human engineers to fix failing infrastructure. Military commanders requested human advisors to help fight the spreading wars. Scientists pleaded for human researchers to help solve problems that had stumped them for years. Each request received the same type of response. Humans would provide aid if lives were at stake, but they had no interest in restoring political relationships. They helped because helping was what humans did, not because they wanted anything from the Federation. Chancellor Zephytar finally faced the reality that his advisors had been trying to make him see for months. The Federation needed humans far more than humans needed the Federation. In fact, it was becoming clear that humans didn't need the Federation at all. Intelligence reports revealed the scope of what humanity had built in just 4 years. Over 30 star systems under human control or protection. Advanced technologies that surpassed anything in Federation space. A growing alliance with species that had been dismissed as minor players in galactic politics. The Lyrani had become master artists and philosophers under human guidance. The Zenth Kori had developed new forms of meditation that expanded consciousness in ways that amazed researchers. The Krevul had evolved from tribal warriors into sophisticated defenders of trade routes and peaceful worlds. "They're not just surviving without us," Morgex reported to the Chancellor. "They're thriving, and they're making their allies thrive too. The species that sided with humans are becoming more advanced, more prosperous, and happier than they ever were as Federation members." The final humiliation came when the Outer Rim systems began declaring their independence from the Federation and requesting membership in what they called the Human Alliance. These were worlds that had suffered under Federation bureaucracy for centuries, and they saw humanity's success as proof that there was a better way. Elder Vex'Shan, the last surviving member of the original council that had voted to expel humanity, made a pilgrimage to the border of human space. The ancient being who had once voted enthusiastically for human expulsion now carried a message of desperate apology. "I seek an audience with human leadership," he transmitted to a border monitoring station. "I come not as a representative of the Federation, but as an individual seeking to make amends for a terrible mistake." The response came from Captain Song, Yu Jin, who had once been the human ambassador's aide. She was now an admiral in the Human Alliance fleet, commanding a ship more advanced than anything in Federation space. "Elder Vex'Shan, your message has been received. You may approach our border station, but understand that this meeting is entirely unofficial. No Federation authority is recognized in Human Alliance space." When Vex'Shan arrived at the border station, he was amazed by what he found. The facility was beautiful and efficient, run by both humans and their alien allies working together as equals. There was none of the rigid hierarchy that characterized Federation installations. Admiral Song Yujin met him in a conference room with windows looking out at stars that had once been considered empty space. Now those stars were surrounded by human colonies and the thriving worlds of their allies. "Elder Vex'Shan," she said formally, "what brings you to our territory?" The old being, who had once towered over humans with arrogant superiority, now seemed small and frail. "I come to apologize," he said simply. "I was wrong about your species. We all were. The galaxy is dying without you, and I wanted to tell you that before I die myself." Admiral Song considered his words. "Your apology is noted, Elder, but apologies don't repair the damage that's been done. The Federation made its choice. We've made ours." "Is there no way back?" Vex'Shan asked desperately. "No way to undo what we did?" "You can't undo the past," Song replied, "but you can learn from it. The species that treated us with respect have been welcomed as allies. The species that voted for our expulsion, well, they're facing the consequences of their decision." "What about mercy?" Vex'Shan pleaded. "Humans are supposed to be compassionate." "We are compassionate," Song said firmly. "That's why we're sending medical aid to plague-stricken worlds. That's why we're providing food to planets facing famine. But compassion doesn't mean forgetting what was done to us, or pretending that relationships can be rebuilt overnight." As Vex'Shan prepared to leave, Song gave him a final message. "Tell your people that humans bear no hatred toward the Federation. We simply have no need for the Federation. We've built something better among the stars, with allies who chose to stand with us when it mattered." The old elder returned to Federation space with a message that no one wanted to hear, but everyone needed to understand. Humanity had moved on. They were no longer the desperate species that had been cast out 4 years ago. They had become something greater, and they had no intention of returning to those who had rejected them. The Federation's golden age was over, ended not by conquest or disaster, but by their own fear of change and growth. They had expelled the one species that could have helped them evolve, and now they were paying the price for that choice. 5 years had passed since the Federation's desperate plea for humanity's return. The once mighty Galactic Alliance was now a collection of broken fragments, each struggling to survive in a galaxy that had grown cold and hostile. Where there had once been unity, there were now dozens of small kingdoms and republics, each fighting for resources and territory. Dr. Quan J. Min, the Human Alliance's chief historian, stood in the vast archives of New Humanity, the megastation that had become the unofficial capital of human space. Around him, holographic displays showed the current state of the galaxy, a patchwork of struggling civilizations where the Federation had once stood proud. The collapse was faster than anyone predicted, he said to his research assistant, a young human named Li Yuna. Within 3 years of their plea for our return, the Federation had fractured into 47 separate political entities. Most are now fighting each other over the remains. Li Yuna studied the displays with sad fascination. Did they ever figure out what went wrong? Some did, Dr. Quan replied. The smarter ones realized that they had treated symptoms as diseases. They thought we were the problem because we brought change and chaos. They didn't understand that we were actually the solution to their stagnation. Across human space, the contrast was remarkable. Where Federation territory had become a battleground of failing civilizations, the Human Alliance thrived as a beacon of cooperation and innovation. 37 star systems now belonged to the Alliance, home to over 2 billion humans and their alien friends. The Lyrani had become master artists whose works were treasured across the galaxy. The Zenthkori had developed new forms of consciousness that helped solve problems no single mind could grasp. The Krival had evolved into sophisticated guardians who protected trade routes and peaceful worlds with honor and wisdom. Captain Park, Du Young, now an admiral in the Alliance Defense Force, worked alongside former Federation Admiral Krixaval, who had defected to human space 3 years earlier. Their mixed-species crews represented everything the old Federation had feared: chaos, unpredictability, and constant change. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Chen So-hee from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority message from the border. Another Federation delegation is requesting permission to enter our space." Admiral Park exchanged glances with Admiral Krixval. "How many does that make this month?" 17. Krixval replied sadly. "All carrying the same message: requests for aid, pleas for mercy, offers of tribute in exchange for protection." This latest delegation was different from the others. Instead of proud diplomats demanding audience with human leadership, it was led by Elder Vexashan, the same being who had made the pilgrimage 5 years earlier. But now he wasn't alone. He brought with him a group of refugees from the Federation's civil wars. Ambassador Song Yu-jin met them at Harmony Station, the border facility that had become a symbol of the Alliance's values. Where Federation installations had been monuments to hierarchy and order, Harmony Station was a living example of cooperation between different species working as equals. Elder Vexashan looked even older and more frail than before, but his eyes held a different quality now. Wisdom born from suffering and loss. Behind him, representatives from a dozen species stood nervously, many showing signs of malnutrition and exhaustion. "Ambassador Song," Vexashan began, "I don't come seeking reunion or demanding justice. I come asking for basic mercy for these people whose worlds have been destroyed by our own mistakes." Song studied the delegation carefully. These weren't the arrogant beings who had voted to expel humanity. These were refugees, survivors of the chaos that the Federation's collapse had unleashed. "What specifically are you asking for?" she inquired. "Safe passage for civilian populations," Vexashan replied. "Food for worlds facing starvation. Medical aid for plague victims. We're not asking you to rebuild our civilization. We know that's impossible. We're asking you to save lives." Song considered the request. Around her, the station hummed with activity as humans and their allies worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old Federation's rigid rules. This was what humanity had built when freed from others' limitations, a society based on cooperation rather than domination. "The Alliance Council will consider your request," she said finally. "But understand, any aid we provide comes with conditions. We won't support governments that oppress their people. We won't provide weapons that will be used to conquer neighbors. And we won't participate in the power games that destroyed the Federation." Vexashan nodded gratefully. "We accept any conditions you set. We've learned too late that survival is more important than pride." The Alliance Council met on New Seoul Station, in a chamber that looked out at the stars where humanity was still, exploring and expanding. President Im Dong-hyuk, now in his second term as elected leader of the Alliance, listened to reports from across human space. "The situation in former Federation territory is worse than we thought," reported intelligence. Chief Park Min-jung, 17 different wars are currently active. The Vrex Empire has conquered 12 systems and shows no sign of stopping. The Kethmori plague has mutated and is spreading again. "What about our medical supplies?" asked Dr. Choi Woo-jin, now the Alliance's chief medical officer. "We've been providing aid to any world that requests it," Park Min-jung replied. "But it's like trying to heal a patient who keeps cutting themselves. Without political stability, our aid just prolongs the suffering." General Shin Ye-won, who had once served alongside Federation forces, spoke from her experience. "The Federation species were taught to follow rules and maintain order. They were never taught how to adapt when those rules stopped working. Now they're like children lost in the dark." "So what do we do?" President Im asked. "Do we watch them? Destroy themselves? Or do we try to help?" The debate that followed showed how much humanity had grown during their exile. These weren't the desperate people who had been cast out 7 years earlier. They were confident, prosperous, and secure in their own identity. They could afford to be generous because they no longer needed anyone's approval. "We help," said Dr. Bae Ji-won, whose communication networks now connected hundreds of worlds. "But we help on our terms, in our way. Not because we need them, but because it's the right thing to do." The Alliance's response was typically human in its creativity and compassion. Instead of trying to rebuild the Federation or restore the Bae old order, they created something new. Refugee sanctuaries where displaced populations could start over, medical stations that provided aid without political strings, and education centers where former Federation citizens could learn new ways of thinking. Captain John Woo-jin commanded one of the medical relief ships that operated in former Federation space. His crew was mixed: humans, Lirani, Zenth Kori, and even some former Federation citizens who had chosen to join the Alliance. "Remember," he told his crew as they approached a plague-stricken world, "we're not here to judge or to conquer. We're here to heal and to teach. If they want to learn our ways, we'll show them. If they don't, we still help them because that's who we are." The contrast was striking. Where the old Federation had demanded compliance and conformity, the Alliance offered choice and opportunity. Where the Federation had punished different ways of thinking, the Alliance celebrated diversity as a source of strength. Not everyone accepted Alliance help. Some former Federation worlds still blamed humans for their civilization's collapse, refusing aid rather than admit they had been wrong. Others tried to use Alliance assistance to rebuild their old systems of hierarchy and control, but many did learn. On the world of Kashari, where the agricultural systems had first begun failing, Governor Thekmor worked with human engineer Kim Hye-jin to build new farms that were better than anything the Federation had ever achieved. Instead of rigid automated systems, they created adaptive networks that could grow and change with their environment. "The humans don't just fix our problems," Governor Thekmor explained to other planetary leaders. "They teach us how to fix our own problems. They show us that change isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace." 20 years later, Ambassador Song Yu-jin, now elderly but still sharp, met with Captain Ryu Hana before her first deep space exploration mission. The young captain was part of a new generation that had grown up in Alliance space, knowing freedom and cooperation as natural parts of life. "Remember," Song told her, "we didn't leave the Federation to punish them. We left to find who we really are. And what we found was that sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away from those who can't see your worth, so you can bloom where you're truly valued." Captain Ryu nodded, understanding the weight of history as her ship prepared to venture into unexplored space. Around them, the Alliance continued to grow and thrive, carrying the seeds of human hope to new worlds and new friends yet to be made. The galaxy had realized too late what they had lost when they let humanity walk away. But humanity had discovered something far more valuable than the Federation's approval. They had found themselves. And in finding themselves, they had shown the universe that there was more than one way to reach for the stars. In the end, the AudioBook Federation's greatest gift to humanity was their rejection,